Welcome back. So did you have a chance to think about what kind of unit test we ought to be writing next? Should we be writing unit tests for adding items into the shopping cart, or should we do something else? I think it might be worthwhile for us to revisit the Thorns and the Gold. And we're back with the Thorns and the Gold. The gold are the happy path scenarios where we're testing the behavior that we expect when everything is working. The thorns, on the other hand, are sort of outlying scenarios where we might need supporting data in order to run our unit tests. Degenerate conditions, the simplistic states or boundary conditions, and exception scenarios, so error conditions. Now we've just created a shopping cart, and potentially we may want to stay with the shopping cart a little bit longer. I think we don't need any supporting data just yet, nor are there any kind of exception scenarios when we're creating a shopping cart. Nothing can kind of go wrong because we're just creating a shopping cart. We're not supplying any arguments. But the degenerate conditions apply to us creating a new instance of a shopping cart. And what I'm talking about here are sort of a simplistic version of a shopping cart. What kind of simplistic versions of a shopping cart might exist? And if I could ask you at this stage to take another 30 seconds to a minute to just think about what kind of simplistic shopping cart might exist and that you can think of, that would be great. See you in 30 seconds. Alright, did you have an opportunity to think about what kind of simplistic shopping carts might exist? My answer is this. It's an empty shopping cart. An empty shopping cart is a simplistic version of a full shopping cart. A full shopping cart has got items in it, and those items have got prices on them, and they all get summed up to end up with a total, and the shopping cart is obviously full, while an empty shopping cart is a much simpler beast. It is, as its very name says, it's empty. It doesn't have any items in it. I think at this point in time, it would be worthwhile for us to write some unit tests that have to do with the empty nature of our shopping cart, of our empty shopping cart. So let's go over to Visual Studio and do that. Alright, we're in Visual Studio. Let's write the unit test for the empty cart. So, fact, public, void, when create cart, I'm just shortening it to cart now from shopping cart, then cart is empty. There we go, that's a nice descriptive name for our unit test. And just on that, it's important for our unit tests to describe the behavior of what's being tested for as best as possible. So it's all about describing the behavior, not how it's implemented, not kind of what kind of code we're writing, but just what the code is achieving. So here we're creating a cart, and then the cart should be empty. Not that it's an empty list, or the list should have a count of 0 or anything like that. Okay, just that the cart is empty. That's sort of the crux, that's the goal, that's what we're trying to achieve. Alright, so how do we go about this? So as usual, we need an instance of a shopping cart, so I'm going to make that cart is equal to new shopping cart. Alright, and then I'm going to say cart dot, how about we give it an items collection? Cart dot items should dot be empty. How about that? So items doesn't exist. Our cart, we've got the code for our cart down here. At the moment it is an empty class. There is no items collection on its interface, on its public interface, okay? So there isn't anything like that. And the idea is that we're trying to tease that out with a unit test like this. Okay, so we need an items collection. That's what we've kind of set here with our unit test. Once again, we've got a red failing test, and it's failing because of a compilation error. And as we found out before, that is a-okay. Right, so let's go and add an items collection in here. So public, maybe enumerable. And what type should we make this? From our design session, we know that we will end up with a rich class in here of shopping cart items ultimately. But as per rule number 3, we want to do the minimum that we can to make this pass. So we could even use a string or an int, but we kind of know it's going to be a rich class, something complex, a shopping cart item, so a reference type. So I'm going to use the simplest possible fundamental reference type that we've got, which is object. Okay, so I'm going to be using that, and this is going to be called items from a unit test. And you know what, I'm just going to make this a getter, right? Because we're only getting items here. We shouldn't really need anything else. All right, fantastic. Should is complaining. All right, so should doesn't exist. I like to use a assertion library called fluent assertion. Okay, that's got this sort of should method on it. So let me add that in. So we're going to come to NuGet and browse for fluent assertions. Okay, add fluent assertions. Yes. Install. Yes. Okay, let's come back to in here, should, and use fluent assertions. Excellent. So our compilation error, our build error has disappeared. Let's run our unit tests. In fact, I'm going to run all of them from down here in the test explorer. Alright, and our new unit test, when create cart, then cart is empty, is failing. So it's still red, but now it's a runtime red. Before we had a compilation error. Test was red because of a compilation error. And the error message says expected cart.items to be empty but found null. Okay, this is good. So we can do something about that. Visual Studio suggested I use ienumerable.empty, and that will do just fine. Later on, we will need to replace this with a proper collection, not a empty placeholder. Something like a list of objects. Okay, that might do the trick, or then later on a list of shopping cart items. But right now, enumerable.empty will work for us, I should think. Right, let's try this out. Let's run all of our unit tests. And our unit test is passing. So now we have got a unit test that is checking that when we create a shopping cart and it ought to be an empty shopping cart, that the shopping cart is empty. And it must be so. It would be weird if we created a shopping cart and immediately there were items in it. Alright, we've had our red test, we turned it green. And what step is next? It's the refactor step. Is there anything that we can refactor in the unit test or in our implementation code? Our unit test looks really nice and tight. We're creating our shopping cart, which is the action, and we can tell that here from the when create cart. When is the action. The then describes the assertion. And if we have a given that describes any preconditions, our initial state. As it stands, we're creating the shopping cart and then items should be empty. This is all very nice and tight and easy to read. It looks great. No, there's nothing to refactor in our unit test. What about our shopping cart? Shopping cart, we have created our ienumerable of object collection, and that is an enumerable.empty. This is also nice and tight, really nothing to refactor. We'll skip the refactor step and it's time for us to move on to the next unit test. I'll see you shortly.